live button now. And we are live. Welcome everyone to another edition of Community Office Hours. Today we're going to be talking CDK for Terraform, and as you can see, we have some special guests with us. Today we have Daniel, Ansgar, and Sebastian. And before I introduce them and introduce myself, I want to call out that this is a HashiCorp community meeting. So we do have some guidelines. Be respectful, be kind, be excellent to one another is mostly what this simplifies down to, is the TLDR. If you would like to check out our community guidelines, you can do so. I just put that into the chat. But yeah, if you have any questions today during the session, feel free to please put those into chat and we'll do our best to get to those. It should be a lively discussion today with all of the people that we have with us. So first off, let's go to you, Daniel. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with the CDK?
Yeah, I'm Daniel from Hamburg, Germany. I just joined a month ago and yeah, work since for the 0.4 version on the CDK now. So my first release is really exciting.
must be fun to plan and apply yourself a lot here at HashiCorp. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, totally.
Moving on to Ansgar, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing with the CDK?
Yeah, so I got 1 month more on my back than Daniel has. So this is the second release I'm in, and what should I say about it? I don't want to spoil or something, but I worked on the Go support, and we're going to see a bit about that soon. So, but I will keep it at that. So we will come back to that later.
Wonderful. I always think that Go support is a lot better than stop support. So thank you for your hard work on on that. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Sebastian. Sebastian, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing with the CDK for Terraform?
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Yeah, so I'm a bit longer around than the other two guys. And I'm super happy that they joined in the last 2 months. So it's like really, really awesome. So before that, it was, well, mostly me and a few people, joining in here and there, but it was mostly me and our open source contributor, John, who's also around for like quite a while already. But yeah, so I joined HashiCorp like earlier, like pretty much at the beginning of this year, but I was working on the CDK for Terraform a bit more than that. So it's like almost a year since, well, I actually started to collaborate with HashiCorp and building this project. And yeah, so it's the entire tech team aligned here in the stream. So it's pretty awesome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. I guess that's my first question. Sebastian, you raise a really good point. I remember thinking back to when the CDK for Terraform was first getting worked on and getting kicked off and started. What's it like? This is a question for everyone. What is it like to be working on a team that's, you're starting to see that growth, you're starting to work with more people? I think I remember when it was Mishra and Sebastian mostly. Yeah, those are the people that I was talking with mostly for the CDK. How does the team feel? What's it like working with more people and being able to focus on some of these things?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see like where we started like pretty much a year ago and where we are now, like just by capacity now, like we have like way more capacity at the moment. So like all the things which were always floating around in our heads, and yeah, we should really do this, we should really do that, and was always constrained by, well, we don't really have the manpower to do this, and yeah, and now it's feeling to start, it's starting to feel like an actual team, and where we can actually ship bigger things, bigger features, and well, it's still like a huge roadmap, and yeah, we can't really tackle everything at the moment, but it's still, well, it's certainly good to see it growing.
That's fantastic to hear. I know that typically, before COVID and everything else, There was that rule about 2 pizza teams where your team should never exceed that of what 2 pizzas could feed. But here at HashiCorp, we're remote first. And so while we still could probably do that with some of our team sizes, it's a difficult thing to deliver pizza internationally at just about the same time. And, you know, might be too late or too early for that as well. So kind of a slight bummer there. But
I think that actually works for us. I mean, Sebastian and I are in the same town, so we can just meet and get the pizza. Like one, Ansgar gets the other one.
It's like something we could work on. Maybe with the Domino's provider for Terraform, we could integrate that with the CDK, or maybe we could write a new provider and truly make this happen. We'll talk about that one. Maybe a hack day project. Awesome. For people that are joining us and just kind of hearing about the CDK for Terraform for the first time, or some people that might not fully understand it, could you tell us a little bit about what it does, you know, what the purpose of the CDK for Terraform is today?
Ansgar, do you want to?
No, I just want to say that you're the master of the CDK and you got to tell them.
Yeah, sure. So like CDK for Terraform is short for Cloud Development Kit for Terraform, and the CDK itself originates from the AWS people, like who like built like something like this for AWS specifically. And what we do build this like for the entire ecosystem of all Terraform providers. So it's not limited to AWS. You can use it in pretty much like any provider you might use in Terraform. And what it does is it allows you to use programming languages, which you might already use to ship your applications, and stay in the same ecosystem and provision cloud resources. Well, by defining your infrastructure in application code, essentially. What it does, like technically, it's a layer on top of the Terraform CLI. And / Terraform Cloud. So you also can use the Terraform Cloud if you're using this already. And what it does, it synthesizes, it compiles your application code down to a JSON format, which Terraform understands. So from that point of view, it's like a layer on top of this, right? So if you don't reinvent the CLI, the core engine of Terraform, that's pretty good as it is. And we just leverage what they have and build abstractions and code on top of this.
Fantastic. I think that it's been interesting to see some of the workflows that have arisen from, you know, having the CDK for Terraform and being able to see people that are, you know, feel a little bit more comfortable working within the programming languages that they know, whether it be, you know, Python or TypeScript or, you know, maybe something else that we can talk about here shortly. But kind of transitioning into that, the CDK for Terraform just released 0.4. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is in this release and some things that might be of note to people that are just starting to take a look at that?
Should I go?
Yeah, please.
Now I can finally plug the Go support. So Sebastian already said that we're building upon some technology built by AWS. So that's called JSII, so the JavaScript interrupt interface. And that also enables the language support for multiple languages. And we currently support, of course, TypeScript, JavaScript. That's what we write the CDK itself in as well. And Python, Java, C#. And I hope I didn't forget one. And now Go as well. And getting kind of many at the moment, sooner or later. And now, or a few months ago, JSII added support for Go. And yeah, it was one of our most requested things to add. And so by the community, and yeah, and that's why we added Go with this release. So we built added the moving parts that are needed for example, to publish the base package that we offer in Go as well, and also to add the provider generation for Go, because I don't know if we've mentioned this yet here, but maybe if someone hasn't heard it, you can use any Terraform provider out there, and even all of the Terraform modules that are available, and generate bindings to them that you can use in your favorite high-level language. So if you want to use Python, you could also do your AWS VPC module with that. And yeah, so now with Go as well. And I could also transition to the others, but I think I want to pull Daniel into the loop because he knows about the asset class. Or do you want to add something?
One thing to add to the Go support, it's experimental. So it's experimental in the CDK for Terraform, and it's an experimental implementation in JSI. So like the core library, which makes this like the cross-language packages happen. And what we mean by that is, in particular, it's probably not really feeling idiomatic to like people who are like heavy Go users. So they might feel like, I know it's not really idiomatic how they would write it, but that's something where we and the AWS team who is responsible for the JSI are actively looking for feedback. So if there's anything which hurts your eyes when you're looking at it, just raise an issue, let us know, and we're happy to like the goal is to make it really idiomatic and to feel it native for Go developers.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. The API may change, and that could hurt. All right. So for the
Daniel, sorry. So
never mind.
Daniel, you built the other part of the 0.4 release.
Yeah, I worked on the assets. That's a construct you can use to move some files into the context of Terraform to use there. That's particularly useful if you think about Lambda functions or a build step or something that requires a set of files that are outside of like the normal context. And yeah, it's a baseline feature, and basically a lot of different things we want to build like in the future are going to depend on this building block.
It's really interesting. I think that kind of seeing each release of the CDK come out for Terraform, it seems like it's just getting more and more feature complete each time. Are there any big things that you see are still needed before people can like really start to use it? Do you see any? Do you see anything that might be an impediment right now, or people are like, oh, if the CDK for Terraform only had this, or are there any things like that, or do you feel like things are really coming along and there's not too much more to be added in for people to hit critical mass and to really start going at their maximum speed?
Well, let me answer this. So I mean, as I mentioned before, so the roadmap is pretty long, pretty like lots of items that we want to ship. Like in terms of critical things, there are likely like a few, right? So like there are like a few basic things that might not be like an issue for like people who are using it. I mean, there are like a bunch of people who are using it already, also in production, which we don't necessarily recommend at this point. But I mean, there are people who are doing this, but they're like, I think we are like, I mean, we are at 0.4, and this implies that like with each next version we might break things, right? So if you can live with that, that's totally fine. There are like a few fundamental things which we are still tackling, but which don't really have like a huge user impact at the moment. But there are like a few internals which will likely change and which will likely be breaking changes. Then the entire story about like debugging, like, okay, when something goes off the rails, like what do you do? How do you get the context you need to actually understand what's happening? That's something where we have like a bit more work to do to make this like a good user experience when you have to debug why something might not work. Then, yeah, I mean, but yeah, in terms of features itself, like I think the core features are sort of there, but it's like the UX, right? The overall UX, there's like lots of opportunities to improve. But yeah, so I know, I think documentation is like certainly one big point, which is still pretty much non-existent. I mean, we rely on Terraform providers, so there's lots of documentation for this, but like in terms of how do you make this, or how would you use CDK idiomatic, right? So like in an idiomatic way, how would you use it? Since I personally believe this might differ from like the traditional Terraform setup. And there, like, if, for example, we're working on like a bunch of examples how to do certain things like regular use cases, how to do this in CDK. And yeah, but in general, I think if people are interested in CDK, they should certainly try it. And if they're really interested, they should try to like just raise a GitHub issue, write us an email, whatever. So we are really interested in user feedback. And so we would really like to hear from people who are using it or who think about using it, but have like problem X, Y, Z, whatever it is. So perhaps we can work on that and prioritize like a bit more. And yeah, so we are looking for feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sebastian. I think that that's a really important point too, is that to get started with the CDK for Terraform, you're operating within, the programming language of your choice, essentially. And so kind of having that knowledge of the programming language and how to use it is something that's really important to know, before you start using the CDK for Terraform to its fullest. Terraform, just using that with the HCL variant is also kind of interesting too. And it's almost kind of like a hourglass shape where, getting started in that 101 experience, there's a lot of ground to cover if you want to learn everything about, Terraform 101, from the core functions to the HCL language itself. And then kind of as you progress, the scope kind of starts to shrink a little bit. But then as you start to become more knowledgeable in all of the different providers and becoming an expert in each and every one of those, you kind of your scope starts to widen again, and you can take a look at Azure or AWS or GitHub or, and so it is a very interesting kind of learning path for, when you choose your Terraform fighter, so to speak, and kind of how you go to explore that. So that's a fantastic point. Awesome. I do see two questions in the chat, and the first one comes from Adil, and it is, can we use Sentinel policies against the CDK?
Well, Sentinel itself works on the Terraform, like on HDL itself, right? So like that's a mismatch between CDK, since we are using like the programming languages to actually synthesize it. So you can't really use it in terms of some kind of linter in TypeScript or Java or whatever it is. However, what you can do, and what people probably should do, is to run this on the JSON, like the HDL compatible JSON output. So which we do generate, and which is what actually is applied and planned by Terraform. So, and therefore this should be used probably to like for Sentinel as the input for Sentinel. So that's some kind of build step probably. I don't know.
Gotcha. Awesome, thank you. The other question I see is, are there any plans or when can we expect to see L2 constructs, or would you suggest that this is ready for enterprises to start using? I think I might recall this from another office hours that we had, but it became a good discussion.
So what was the question, like level 2 constructs or enterprise usage?
I think first one is layer 2 constructs.
Anyone else want to jump in, or?
I could. I don't think there are any particular plans at the moment to build like the big library of layer 2 constructs like AWS offers. That would keep us occupied for a lot of time that we could spend on improving even better topics of the CDK. But of course, we're experimenting with it. And Sebastian, I think I wouldn't call it the first layer 2 construct, but it's a work in progress thing at the moment. Maybe you want to answer that.
I mean, of course, we are experimenting, or like we use it, like like for like a bunch of, we are dog fooding this essentially, right? So we try to use it and to like come across various pain points which we see, which the user might see, and of course, level 2 constructs is certainly very interesting. So what we built is like some Node.js function which essentially wraps it into runs it through a build process, and then gets deployed to essentially any serverless function provider. It might be Lambda or whatever, like Azure Functions, doesn't really matter in the end. So however, it's far from this integrated abstraction which the AWS CDK team built for their service. And I think they're around for 3 years already. They spent significant parts of their time actually in building these pattern libraries, and I think they still haven't covered not even 60 or 70%. It's probably half of this. So it's a giant scope, and it's probably true for Azure as well and for Google. So what we are thinking about is probably to find the common patterns which are which are similar in the different cloud environments, and that we can provide certain tools which makes it easier to use these providers. In the AWS in the AWS ecosystem, huge pain point is usually the identity and access management, IAM. It's which action, which service is allowed to talk to this service and stuff like this. And so I think there's a good opportunity to make this a bit more painless, and provide good tooling to support the user. Then these build steps, which also building upon the asset construct, which Daniel talked about. Make it easy to take some Node.js code and ship it as a function, and bundle the dependencies, I don't know, minimize it, whatnot, so whatever is part of this process. Docker builds would be another example, archiving some files and put it on the storage somewhere, stuff like this. And then in the end, enable perhaps the community to organizations to build their own abstractions, however they might see a fit. And I think what we can provide is good suggestions for good workflows. What do we think works really well in the context of CDK, and how would you do this in Azure or in Google or on AWS, and then by this, in the end, enable the user to build something specific for their situation.
Gotcha. That makes sense, and I agree. I think that it's going to be at some point in time, it's nice to have those examples available and see, what might be a best practice for this kind of context, or those types of examples. I've seen a few of those around the Terraform community at large, and creating some modules, or how do I work with auto scaling groups in AWS, some things like that people have showcased, which have been really nice. So I'm curious to see how the CDK for Terraform, how that changes the landscape and changes the examples that people want to share, as well as what tools are built on top of things. One question I get asked a lot about is have people that haven't started with infrastructure as code and are looking to import that state. Now I'm kind of curious to see what tooling can be built, and just some other things on that front. I know that we're still early days in a lot of these different contexts. So I'm excited to see what things.
The good thing is that we share lots of problems with the traditional Terraform CLI, the Terraform core. So in the end we have lots of overlapping problems. So it's in the end probably things that you can tackle on a broader scope, even not even just for CDK.
It's going to be fun once we can start to control some Tesla cars and other things like that. It'll be really, really crazy. Awesome. I did have one more question, and then would love to transition into some demos that we have for you today. The last question, and I think I can answer this one, and look to y'all for any extra clarification. But question is there a plan to add more languages to the CDK? So for the CDK, this utilizes a dependency called the JSII, which is a framework that allows for these additional languages to be added. So as more languages get added to JSII, then we can incorporate that with the CDK for Terraform. Is that mostly correct, Sebastian and everyone else, or is there any other kinds of concerns on that front?
Exactly, that's exactly this. With the addition that they're like open issues. So if you want to see like a certain language and check the issues, and if it's not present, then like the issues in JSI. So this I don't know, probably we can post the URL somewhere. So that's a good point to get started. Well, to at least get an idea what kind of languages might be supported in the future. But I think Go has to mature a bit first before there's probably like a plan to add like anything new. Like that's my guess. I don't have any insights there, but that's my guess.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm curious to see what gets added to that. I'm still hoping for Fortran, but we'll see, or Cobalt maybe. But fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Finally, you can make use of that knowledge.
It's like, hey, I'm gonna keep on believing. Cool. Well, with that, I'd love to turn it over to Daniel first to show us one of our demos today. We have a few things to show you, but yeah, I'm excited to check these out. So with that, I'd love to turn over to you, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to show my demo around GKE. So Google Kubernetes engine. See my screen correctly? Right. Great. So what I built here is a basic application. Let me start from the top here. We define infrastructure layer. So we want to have a cluster set up with a service account and with a service account that allows us to push to registry.
Dennis, sorry to interrupt. Could you explain the scope, like what you're building here?
Yeah, thank you. So what I'm building here is the infrastructure for a small team who wants to deploy their applications onto Google Kubernetes engine. They have some services defined. I put them here in the services directory. Each of these is currently a node project, but could be totally different things. And the goal I set was to make it easy to deploy all these in different environments on top of like Kubernetes and make the seamless experience to get new versions out and develop with this tool.
So this means you have like 3 services, and in the end, what you're going to do is like you're provisioning infrastructure in Google, like with the Kubernetes cluster, like this managed Kubernetes offering from Google. And in the end, this will be like all these services will be deployed via CDK TF deploy and done. That's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal.
Awesome.
I split that up into different stacks because I wanted to have like the infrastructure laid out first, and then with Kubernetes, there's often some baseline things you need. So in our case, it's like a cert manager to get new certificates, and then we have the applications and different namespaces to allow isolation. But let me walk you through that. So we need to do some, like previously mentioned, some access control things. So I set up some service accounts, some IAM memberships to allow these things to push. Docker images up to the container registry in Google. I have this cluster definition here. The cluster has a small initial pool of nodes and like bigger node pool that gets then added to the cluster. And that's the base infrastructure. The cool thing.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I've never worked with Google Kubernetes engine. So the container cluster, that's the kind of Google give me a Kubernetes?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, nice.
It gives you a Kubernetes cluster inside of the inside Google Cloud, and the node pools. Like normally, you divide different nodes into pools where you can have different machine sizes to allow for better scaling.
So that's the computation power underneath, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And like in practice, you would normally have different node pools that match your workloads a bit better. So if you have like a lot of Lambda functions or like small functions, small microservices, you would have like small machine types that would matches the size a bit. And if you need like big nodes for heavy computation, something, or some memory intense nodes, something, you would divide that into node pools. These would have some identifiers on them, so that the Kubernetes scheduler would schedule the workloads that are meant for them onto those, and you can divide your landscape a bit depending on what is needed. But and this example is pretty basic, just one node pool, nothing fancy. But in the real world, you would have different things you could do there. And yeah. To reference like this cluster that we create inside of a different stack, we use here a data resource. So these data sources can reference something by name here, so we get the cluster out. What is briefly not mentioned, maybe interesting for some folks, we also support modules, like Terraform modules inside of CDK. So here you see this CKA auth module, CDK JSON. There. I took that from the Terraform modules. That's pretty nice because it abstracts all the authentication stuff away from you. So for example, it gives you like a kubeconfig, and I use that here with the file to have a kubeconfig running locally. So if I do export kubeconfig, it's actually on the root path here, so that.
And apologies for interrupting, Daniel. I got a couple comments from the chat. If you wouldn't mind increasing your size just a bit.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me.
Believe it or not, that's one of our most requested features during live streams are in bumping up that typeface.
Yeah, it's always hard to guess the right size. I hope that's better now. If not, please shout out again.
I think that looks good. Yeah, please let us know in the chat if you if that looks good to you, or if you have any other questions, and we'll get to those after the demo.
Yeah, cool. So I think I deleted the kubeconfig. We'll get rid of it soon, so I'll show you later. Yeah, and then with this these different things that you need to provide to Kubernetes provider to enable it, we define that here, and by using in this base layer here, using the auth thing, we can we have now inside of this base layer, we have the provider for Kubernetes set up, and we also set up a Helm provider. Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes that we'll use down here to install the release of the cert manager. That's a shard that helps you to get new certificates and all kind of security things. We don't use it yet here in this example, but yeah, this deploys the shard. And then we have the application layer. And if you look down at the usage, we define different environments: development, staging, production. And each of these environments, like we set up the cluster connection here so that the Kubernetes provider is set up with our cluster. In theory, we could also use different clusters for different application layers. But in this case, we just stick with one cluster to make it a bit simpler. And we create a new namespace, which is the box basically where you put all your Kubernetes objects in, so that you have like isolation between the different layers of your application, different services you want to provide. And then we do some dynamic stuff here, which is kind of cool, I think. So what we do here is we get the services path and read the file system. So if you remember, we have servers 1, 2, and 3 here. And for each of these services, we call the application function. And that gives us 3 different services that are going to be deployed. For each of those, we build and push the Docker image inside of the Terraform execution, and then we define the service that actually exposes them. And before we go,
how are you building the image? Like, is it like, are you sharing out, or how is it?
Yeah. Right. So there's a provider for Docker, like by Kreuzwerker, and they have a registry image, but I ran into issues there because it wouldn't work with the Google registry. So this is a bit of a workaround, but also maybe nice to see how to do workarounds. So I'll walk through that Docker pushing now. That's interesting.
I think okay, on a high level, yeah.
Okay, like on a high level, I do some magic here. Like this, the project here is going to be based off a blog post I'm going to write. So I'll go to the details a bit later. Like in the blog post, but most probably.
So, but like essentially, you're building like in each of the service directories, you're building like a Docker image and pushing this up to the Google registry.
Exactly, yeah. I built the tag here together with the content hash. So let me walk you through the Terraform asset here, but that's this asset here is defines a path to the service directory. What happens under the hood is this one on execution time gets copied over to the Terraform stack asset folder. I'm going to show you that after I run that in a few minutes, and then we get an asset back, and this asset has a path on it. It has a asset hash and has a file name, and we use this asset hash here, for example, to make sure we have like a Docker image tag that's pinned to this exact version of the code that's running underneath, and I'll show you that later. If we change the implementation of our service, then this hash changes, and therefore this triggers the build to be run again. And because the tag changes, the deployment here is going to have a new image tag. So the deployment also changes, and we get an updated version of our application up and running.
The Docker build process is running at compile time or at Terraform apply time?
It's running at Terraform apply time. So
through the local exit command, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I can show that real quick. So if I do, let me type here. More times. Cool. So the development environment I have not installed right now. So I'll do that here. So first, this synthesizing is kicking off, which is creating a CDK TF out folder with the JSON that's used in Terraform, and it's also going to copy over the files mentioned in the asset construct. And let me make that a bit bigger here. Yeah, so you see here that our deployment is getting activated. Here you saw quickly the resources for the images are being pushed. And now we're waiting on the last deployment to finish. Okay, that's the same size. Yeah.
Could you, while we are waiting for this, could you also like touch on the like stack and app like on the concept. Like, so you have this development stack. So what does this mean? And like, how would you like? How does this work? Like, what's conceptually more like? So that's like an isolated Terraform namespace, or like is it like?
Yeah, exactly. It provides isolation between the different parts of the Terraform execution. So currently there's no really clean way to share stuff between these different stacks. This means each of these different stacks is a thing on its own without being interfered by other parts. So yeah, that's
so it maintains like it maintains its own state, right? So like it's like
exactly.
an isolated state between like sort of the same thing, but in the end, like different versions or like different layers, however you slice it.
Exactly. If you look into the CDK out folder, there's a stacks subfolder, and inside this folder you see all the different stacks that I've defined. And if we look into, for example, development that just ran, you see the CDKTF JSON, which is our the JSON definition of what the constructs mean. So what we write in TypeScript gets synthesized into like a big JSON file that defines the same things that normally would be defined in HCL. And with that, we work against the Terraform CLI. And if you look into the assets folder, you see for all the services we have like a dedicated folder. And yeah, that's the magic of the asset construct. It adds these to the context here, and we get a path back that's local to the environment of the Terraform execution.
So that's essentially where the Docker image would be built in the end, in this folder.
Yeah, exactly. Docker is invoked with this folder as as context, and we also have these Dockerfile folders, which are also a bit overblown currently, but they would copy individual Docker files to use for these assets in the Docker build process.
Awesome.
If we switch back, it's all been deployed. If we do, I did that here, I think. If we get the pods, we see that in each of these deployments has generated its pods, and these services are running actually. So we got them deployed.
Amazing.
And yeah, the cool thing with the with Terraform here is, if we now run this again, it won't do that much anymore because we didn't change anything inside of the applications. So there's no change and no need to rebuild anything. It still needs to check if the state and the new state is different and so on. So there's a bit of work on the planning side, but actually only the local file is being replaced because they're always replaced. And if I go here now and change this from Hello World 1 in our first service and run this again, we're going to see that the Docker image is going to be recreated, and also the deployment is going to be recreated. The service that exposes the deployment through load balancer or like something different is actually not recreated because nothing changes for it. It just references the same thing again.
That is nice. How many times have I run Terraform because I didn't configure it right and it just wanted to replace it over and over again? Yeah, there are ways to inhibit that, but nice.
Yeah, the magic here is the hash on the asset that makes it clear that nothing changed.
That's really awesome. I like how you broke that into all of those different environments as well. I think that's when working with Terraform on an HCL standpoint, that's a big question that I get asked a lot. Are how are ways in which I can split up these different environments? And so really cool to kind of see that use case using CDK for Terraform.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, that's basically it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I did get one question, which was, will Terraform Cloud support CDK, TF, and apps in the future? I think the short answer for that is the fun standard warning. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a product manager, but I know that there are definitely some use cases that are being explored within Terraform Cloud, and the teams are very open to feedback on how we can best enable you to work at your best. And so definitely something that feel free to at me, or I'll follow up with you. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter or anything like that. At OnlyDole is where you can find me, and I can definitely ask a couple people about that and get back to you on that one. Definitely TBD, but I would not be surprised if we start to see more things utilizing that in the future. Not sure if any.
You could use it in theory. You just have to have a build step in front of it. So you have to actually compile it down to JSON, and from there on, as you saw, it's like all like we have this use case in mind. So it's like the entire output is built in a way that it contains everything, and that you can upload it and just run it wherever you have Terraform present, basically. So without any other dependencies. So it works, but well, sort of. And like a way better integration. Yeah, of course, that's something which is on our radar.
Cool.
But it works with. Sorry.
No, definitely should be fun to see on that front and kind of how that develops. We did get asked another question pertaining to your demo, Daniel, and how would this code change if we needed to deploy on EKS in AWS, was the question.
Sure. Let me share again real quick. So if you just want to deploy on a different Kubernetes provider, the only thing we need to change is you would need to make the use cluster function here aware of the provider. So in here we use the data container cluster to fetch that cluster. We could do you could make it like a if statement, switch statement, or even use like a function that you can pass or something that determines what cluster it is. And basically the matching point that needs to be the same is we need to configure the Kubernetes provider. So on the infrastructure layer, you need to change pretty much everything because this is tied specifically to the Google Cloud. And if you if we would say, I don't know, you want to have the staging production you have still on AWS or something, and you have developed in the Google Cloud or something, just as an example, you could do you could make this function here, like pass down the environment, for example, and in this function you can determine which data to use, which cluster to get, basically, and then you would be set. So it's also pretty nice if you want to directly move somewhere to a different provider. You have one place to change this, and it's easy to get over. So, I hope.
So essentially, the actual underlying infrastructure would change, but like the services or the service layer plus the deployment process would stay the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like always kind of true with Kubernetes, but I think what's one of the big strengths of our CDK here, because if you, for example, abstract in like a JavaScript function that you want to run like a Docker container, you could have like one implementation that supports a Kubernetes cluster, one implementation that supports EC2 instance or something, one that supports Google Cloud Run, and for example, like your infrastructure team can gradually improve or like gradually add more support for different providers depending on the direction where your company wants to go. and you can like switch out where it's actually run unbuilt step by step, because you have this abstraction that between like your application code and between the Cloudflare they want to use, and like in terms of the programming language already, you need to have something different there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. Yeah, it's interesting to start to look to see how all of these different clouds utilize all these different services, whether it be Google's Kubernetes engine or the Elastic Kubernetes service in AWS, and trying to figure out ways to map all of those things. I know when I first started using Terraform, I had a misunderstanding about, like, oh, I can declare some compute over here and some storage over here and go to any cloud. And that's not how things work, right? Things are specific to each of the clouds because they're called different things. They're utilized in different ways and have those different API abstractions and structures. And so it's interesting when you have to switch contexts in between there. Cool. Fantastic. Thank you so much again, Daniel. I did have one more question and then was going to shift over to Ansgar, who also had a demo. That question is, how mainstream is the CDK for Terraform support from HashiCorp? Will this become the primary focus moving forward, or is this to support secondary to the mainline HCL configurations? I think for that, honestly, and I'll turn this over to you, Sebastian, if you have any more to add on that, but I'd say really here at HashiCorp, we're trying to find ways to help you and work through your workflows. And so whether HCL is a better fit for you, by all means, you should absolutely use that. And if the CDK for Terraform is something that works for you, that's also absolutely what you should use if that fits your use cases. Both of those means of using and working with Terraform are supported fully by HashiCorp. But again, it kind of depends on what your workflow is. I don't think at this time we have a preference one over the other. HCL has been used more often, so there's a little bit more, that's been a little bit more battle tested up and through until this point. But CDK for Terraform is just getting kicked off. We're looking for feedback, and so if you have any ideas on how we can improve that or things that might help you with your workflow, we're all ears and definitely want to hear you out on those fronts.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that sums it up pretty well. So one addition, like the support, there's no commercial support for CDK for Terraform at the moment. So of course, there's the open source, the GitHub repo, they can raise issues. And again, if you like the idea and would actually like to try it and don't really know how, please reach out to us, and yeah, we are really happy to help and to talk to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining in on our journey today and sticking it through this long into the hour. I think to kind of play us out, I would love to turn it over to Ansgar and kind of going through your demo. And then if you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. We'll get it to as many as we can before we close at the top of the hour, maybe a couple minutes after. Cool. With that, I'd like to turn over to you, Ansgar.
Thanks. I hope not. So it will be very short, just for those who are interested how Go looks like, and not just Go, but Go with the CDK for Terraform, of course. And I'm not very proficient in Go, so it may look like okay for me, but to others it does not feel that idiomatic, so I can't tell that. But yeah, let me just shortly show you. So this is some example project that I set up today with the CDK init command. And there's also a guide for Go to getting started that does basically the same like you're going to see here now. And I'm not going to get into detail with all the CDK related files, except for our entry point and what this Go looks like. And for this deck, I'm just having a Docker image locally that is going to be created. So just Nginx doing nothing, and then also launching a Docker container locally. And I'm using the Kreuzberger Docker provider that also Daniel talked about earlier. And yeah, so this is what it looks like. And at the top, I got some imports and also some imports which were generated or which point to the generated code, which I got via executing CDK tf get, which is in this directory and contains the provider bindings. But I won't go into detail of that now. And yeah, and then we're creating, and I think I'm gonna collapse this so everything is visible. We are creating a new Docker provider with an empty config and some Docker image for the Nginx laters, and keep locally forwards, whatever that does. I copied it, I gotta admit. And yeah, and then we're using that one. So we are referring to the Docker image variable into which we put this new image. And then, yeah, we are calling it tutorial and exposing the port locally. And I'm just going to start it and meanwhile talk, so we can just spare ourselves a bit of time. So I'm going CDK tf, or what was it, deploy. Autocomplete helps sometimes. And so one thing that is a bit interesting about Go is this. So why don't you put the string in there just like it is? And this is the way that optional values were implemented for JSII and Go. So if there's something like keep locally, which could possibly be left out, you couldn't just pass nothing in there if it is supposed to be a Boolean, as there's an optional type in Go. And as far as I learned, what some projects do is they use pointers to different types, and the JSI.bool or .string helper just gives a pointer to that variable. So I could also do whatever name and put that string into a variable and refer to it over here. But as I'm having a pointer, I got to add this at first. So that's another way of writing it. But as we don't want to specify variables just for putting a value in there, there's this hyper thingy that you might find all over the code and probably ask yourself, why is that? And yeah, let me just type yes for this to be started, just to promise or show you that it works. And I hope it doesn't take that long to download the Nginx image if I haven't got it locally yet. Yeah, but to complete this example, there's something more going on at the bottom. So we're having some entry point for our Go app, and we're creating a new app that is the construct of the CDK for Terraform, and that one can be used or is used to synthesize our application into the JSON representation that is deployed by Terraform. And yeah, we are having our new MyStack, which is the one that was created over here. And yeah, we are passing the app in there because it belongs to that app and passing it some name. So that's what it's called in the Terraform state, for example. And now I can also do curl on localhost and see something that sounds like Nginx. So it's running. And yeah, Docker PS, of course, shows us that one as well. And I'm gonna clear everything up with destroy. And it probably needs me to confirm. Yes, that's a good thing that it asks me, so I don't accidentally destroy production or something. And yeah, now it's gone and everything is clear again. And that was just a very short look into Go. And yeah, I'd give it back to you, Taylor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's fun to see things go and kind of lift off there. So that was really, really incredible. I'm excited to see what that means for some stacks and just kind of getting up to speed with Go myself. So might have to check out a few demos on that front. Awesome. I did see one more question in the chat before we close out. Again, thank you all for joining. This question is prefaced. This one's a little in the weeds, but have you considered breaking out the generated Python code into multiple files? Currently, the bundle is 24 megabytes, and that breaks IntelliSense in my IDE.
Yes, this was an issue which was popping up in GitHub already. And yeah, the short answer is yes, we are aware of this. We're trying to find a solution with the JSI folks, and yeah, essentially trying to break it out into, I don't know, perhaps namespaces, different files. We will see how this actually works. I mean, there is usually a fix. Usually, this is a fix is to bump up the cache or the cache for IntelliSense. So, like depending on the IDE, this is I know for PyCharm, I think it was 2 megabytes limit, and if you just bump it up to 50 or what, then this will. I mean, it's still slow, but you know, it will sort of work at least.
Fantastic, cool. Definitely hoping that one gets fixed. It's always fun when things go bump in the night. Usually it's DNS. Sometimes it's just the payload of the file that you're looking at. Awesome. Well, thank y'all for joining today. Daniel, Ansgar, Sebastian, this was an absolute pleasure. Some final things to plug before I turn it over to y'all for some final points of wisdom. HashiConf EU is starting on June 8th. Going to June 11th, and registration is free. I'm going to go ahead and pop that link in the chat if that's something that you haven't signed up for and want to sign up for. We have some incredible announcements. No spoilers. I won't spoil it for you, but definitely recommend checking in because there's quite some things to check out, especially during the keynote. If you want to check out our Learn tracks, learn.hashicorp.com is a fantastic place to check those out. We just went through a big redesign, so it looks a lot better, and it's very easy to get added to different tracks and kind of go through your learning journey there, no matter what product you're looking at, whether it be CDK for Terraform, Waypoint, Console, Vault, you name it. Any one of our products, we've got lessons on it. And with that, yeah, do any of you have any final words of wisdom that you want to impart on our group?
Well, just for the HashiConf, so there will be a lightning talk for CDK for Terraform on Wednesday, I think Wednesday afternoon. And yeah, so it's like a bit more condensed, like in 15 minutes. Well, what's the state? Where are we going? So yeah, please join there. Yeah, and other than that, just yeah, thanks for having me or having us, and it was really a pleasure to be here.
It was. Thanks.
Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank y'all so much. We'll CDK you at HashiConf and wish you a wonderful time.